All right, this answers the question, is Singapore part of the Anglo-Saxon world? The answer is yes. And you can also see that another pressure point, the US Canadian warship sailed through Taiwan Straits. So you have Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, um, United States, okay, and you have the Japanese, South Korean, and just only there's this North Korea sub missiles. Okay, so North Korea also joined in, and the pressure in Asia is the Indo-Pacific is mounting, and it is a Asian century, which they said in when China joined the WTO in 2001. That's just 20 years. The Asian century uh, faces challenges, right? So a lot of people think that wow, you know, they're very proud to be Asian when China joined the WTO. So perhaps the plan was already in the pipeline that when America goes into a financial crisis, which happened in 2008, the deglobalization will happen, and a lot of the United States will move inwards, and the interdependence will break down, and it has broken down. So it dragged for 8 years from 2008 to 2016. That's the time you have Obama for 8 years. Okay, so there was it was more like a progressive moving from a neoliberal world, and that was the tail end of neoliberalism. Okay, and 2016 was the start of a new world. Okay, so everything a new world, that means you see lesser of interdependence. Interdependence that's going to be very different. Okay, and a lot of people still stuck in the old world because that was they ran for many years after 1945 all the way till 2008. So that was about 60 over years. If you go to 2016, there will be 70 over years. Okay, unprecedented growth and development, and everyone was happy. There wasn't any major wars, but I do see a war coming. North Korea is what they are trying to capture, and if they are successful in getting North Korea, if you look at the history, 1949, Taiwan and North Korea, or the Korean Peninsula, they had a deal then. Okay, so if they get North Korea, means something must happen to Taiwan. Okay, maybe China gets Taiwan, North Korea, and the Korean Peninsula will have a reunification. So it's going to be very interesting. Um, what's the position of Singapore? You can see very clearly. Singapore is just a military base for the British. Okay, nothing exceptional about Singapore. Singapore is very good at one thing. Can I just ask you, what is Singapore very good? So a lot of people think that this government is so great. It starts with C. I need to say this all the time. Singapore government, everything is about that C. What's that C? Compliance. Okay, so you can see. Let me just show you why is it that they want to delay. They want to delay the or extend the stabilization phase is because you can follow the news. You can see what's going to happen in Singapore. Okay, um, partly because it's not here. Partly because Britain has come out and said that, oh, you know what, they should tighten up restriction in the United Kingdom. They should wear masks. They have social distancing. So everything in Singapore is following international norms. Okay, so when the world has a Bitcoin ETF, so Singapore follows Bitcoin. And when the world has SPAC, Special Purpose Acquisition Company, Singapore also have Special Purpose Acquisition Company. And those two companies, GIC and Temasek, will be the at the forefront of all these. So Singapore, everything is just follow. But when it comes to the wages, they follow corporate world. They don't follow the politicians that are paid internationally. So when they do that, basically they financialize the whole system. So the financialization started, if you ask me, since Lee Kuan Yew stepped down. So when you look at neoliberalism, when it started in 1992, neoliberalism, the fall of the Soviet Union, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Lee Kuan Yew stepped down and Goh Chok Tong became the prime minister. Singapore accelerated financialization. A lot of the statutory boards were all transformed, and the departments of theirs became Temasek Link companies eventually. Okay, so the ministries had lesser subsidiaries or companies, private companies. Okay, and most of them moved to to Temasek, and some Temasek became a sovereign wealth fund. Okay, our CPF was actually under the MOM, and because of the legislation, it's legal, right? You transfer the money from MOM will buy bonds that are created by MAS, which is the central bank. So the government gets that money and raise those money, and that means you transfer from MOM to the government coffer. And then they phase out the money to GIC to invest overseas. So that kind of money is actually all from uh, that was all accumulated by the first generation of political leaders who worked very hard to establish companies, okay, to regulate the sectors, industrialize the economy, and then there's only one person who stayed on. His name was Lee Kuan Yew, if you know. Okay, so he stayed on and he became the chairman of GIC. And then Goh Chok Tong was doing the financialization in Singapore, and Lee Kuan Yew finally lost the money at Lehman Brothers in 2008. So he stepped down in 2011, stepped down from politics, which I think he knew fully well. He knew fully well that he lost credibility, even at the international stage. So if people would ask him what happened, Mr. Lee, I think he had no answer. So um, now Lee Hsien Loong is the chairman of GIC. Okay, so that is for the Singapore side there. And what is happening in China is very interesting now because you see the Chinese are, they have been talking about how to make China great again. And but at the same time, they're facing a problem. The problem is their biggest customer is turning against them. Okay, and the biggest customer has many friends. Okay, so the Chinese have some friends, but I would say there are very few real friends. Firstly, they do not believe in the sort of strategic alliances that the Americans have. The Americans have AUKUS, Quad, all kinds of alliances. And then the Americans, through the British, will have the five forces, which include Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, New Zealand, and United Kingdom. Okay, that's the military. And then the British have free trade agreement with Japan, and Singapore is close to Japan. So Japan is still close to the United States, and South Korea is, closer to America. And South Korea will be deployed to, negotiate with North Korea. So the business network of America is way more established than Chinese. Okay, so when you look at this sort of warships going out there, it in itself it signals um, the kind of support that the Americans have. The American economy might be, in trouble, and they're still negotiating on the infrastructure bill, how to rebuild America. Okay, and but then on the international relations, the geopolitics, the world still there are many countries that still want America. to sustain the hegemony. So the liberal hegemony, right, that we saw may not be like what it used to be, a unipolar world. But at the end of it, the hegemon must still be there. Okay, it's very important to um, look at how Charles Kinneberger look at the liberal hegemony, the hegemonic stability theory. So today, when we look at liberals, right, um, we have to be very careful, okay, because there isn't such a thing as total the full endorsement of liberalism without a hegemony. It was like that for a while. It didn't bring peace and stability as what the liberals have actually predicted. Okay, it was a great idea, but then it didn't work out. Okay, and the other experiment that didn't work out, that is very obvious now, is that when the Americans wanted to open up China and work with China, they hoped that the Chinese will be like the Americans in terms of opening up, embrace democracy, have proper institutions. That experiment has failed. I don't see how it can work in the first place. There are a lot of critics who say that Americans were, dreaming about it. So who was the first one? Of course, after 19, when Bill Clinton came to power in 1992, okay, he said that China would be like America. So the Americans loved Bill Clinton. There was Jiang Zemin then. Okay, and when Bush came into power, there was some tension, but they were still hopeful that China would be like America. So for 16 years, they were hoping China would be like America. So in 2008, it was obvious that at the end of it, China would still embrace central planning because in 2008, the global financial crisis, China was supposed to open up their financial market, okay, but they didn't. And I've said to you, instead, they were still embracing the interdependence of supporting America, and America will continue to buy Chinese goods, and that didn't work out at all. Okay, so the Americans say no, I don't want this deal anymore. You didn't open up the economy for the MNCs to go into China. So in the end, what happened was they created their own MNCs like Alibaba, Tencent, TikTok, and whatever not. You got a lot of these companies that come up that wanted to challenge America. And the Chinese argument was very clear that you wanted competition, so we are giving you competition. Okay, but then the Americans' response was, we want competition, but we want competition in your own backyard as well. Okay, so but you're not opening up your market for us. So this debate finally led to the trade war. Okay, so when you talk about Trump was actually the final. It was a flashpoint for the U.S.-China relationship, and that was the end of that interdependence. So for 8 years, Obama was trying to persuade the Chinese to open up. It didn't work out. Instead, the Chinese became stronger with their Huawei and their technology companies and the chip making, and borrowed cheap money from the United States, still borrowed through all the investment banks, and continue to use those money to expand their BRI projects, and also started to create the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and all these were all American money. Okay, so they wanted to move their surpluses that they had away from American dollar and then placed it under AIIB, which was also against the deal. And finally, everything got complicated, and the trade war started. Again, so if you look at it, there are only two flashpoints in Asia now: Taiwan and North Korea. All right. So liberalism is a fantastic idea, but I doubt it is workable at every stage of geopolitics. Okay, so we have to discuss about this, but do take note of the core tenets of liberalism. Very important for you. Anyone got any questions so far? Anyone got any questions so far? No. Okay. I'm not sure if I already posted this lecture the slides on Sim Connect or not. Can you check? I posted 4, 5, and 6. So this one it might be there already. Okay, so we are gonna have another week of class. I'm not sure if it's gonna be another 3, 4 weeks after that because they extended the stabilization phase. But next week we'll still be online, so there's no physical class or hybrid. Is still online next week. So please take note. Don't go to SI and say, "Hey, what are that?" Okay. Um, Now, liberalism. Is it a thing that will happen again? Yes, it's going to happen again. I'm not sure what it's going to be called. So maybe I will just go through those sequence with you, but I need to go through the learning outcomes for this. The first, the core tenets of liberalism, you need to use it in your argument. Okay, a lot of people just use liberalism, but you have to use that economic part of liberalism that we have in this course. You can use your IR stuff, but then you need to add features of political economy. Okay, and they are, when we talk about Smith, Adam Smith, and I'm sure a lot of people know who's Adam Smith, but not knowing exactly what the hell is happening. But Adam Smith was a advocate of liberalism. Just to repeat what I said earlier in the first few lectures, that Adam Smith was advocating for an open economy, international trading system, because at that point in time, Scotland was industrializing rapidly. And Scotland, as all countries that industrialize rapidly, they need resources. They needed cheap labor. They needed raw materials that are cheap in every part of the world, Africa and Asia and Latin America. And they had all the machines ready, and they had the tools to make the machines as well. So they needed steel, they needed everything, and to export the finished goods to the parts of the world. So basically, they monopolized the lifestyle, okay, which is like what you see today in today's context. Microsoft create the software, and the rest of the world would just adopt Microsoft. Okay, so that point, that kind of liberalism, it's very very interesting. Okay, at that point in time for or very logical and rational for those colonies and countries that were still poor and poverty stricken. So what did they do? They helped the colonies to come out of poverty in that sense. Yeah. Okay, so liberalism and liberalization can help um, to get countries out of poverty. Don't get me wrong for that. Okay, but liberalism, to the extent of cultural homogenization, is another level. Okay, when you say cultural homogenization, what are you doing? Are you creating? Are you accentuating, or are you trying accentuating the civilization of the country, the growth of that civilization, exacerbating the cultural identity, or are you trying to create or invent a new society for them? Okay, the answer is quite clear cut. If you just look at Singapore, it's cultural homogenization. They like to say that we are a global city, okay, um, but then we should embrace all, okay, and just embrace whatever you want to embrace, okay. But it is not that sort of cultural identity that this government has created, okay. So Singapore is only good for one thing, compliance, like what we say, right? So you just, adopt the best practices or various practices, the French management, the Japanese management, American management, various kinds of management system here. And then they say we are very diverse, or we have all kinds of foods, all kinds of food, F&B outlets. Oh, so we are a very global city. But the cultural identity is still lacking, which is what the liberals have actually been advocating, because liberals believe in individual capacity building, okay, in that society, in that village or our own village, right? So the myth of globalization, which is not explained to many people, is that cultural homogenization, it's an experiment, but actually you become lackluster because there's a limit to it. Okay, so this pandemic shows you clearly that this free movement of people is very crucial for the government. because it allows them to raise revenues through taxes and movements of goods come in and out of Singapore, movement of people, transit through Singapore. The Changi Airport becomes alive. SIA becomes a great airline, and then the casino is fantastic. Okay, so that is the kind of liberalism we talk about. Okay, so you don't put everything Adam Smith, Lee Kuan Yew, whatever you see in the news, when you say liberalism, wow, you just embrace. So I want to go through the main tenets of liberalism so that you're very clear about it. Okay, that liberalism will have its limitation. Okay, so the warships, the tension that you see on the South China Sea, the tension in the Taiwan Strait, is a clear sign that liberalism at some point will also direct us to mercantilism because of this, because of the fact of interest. Okay, so interest is very important when you're analyzing everything. You don't just you don't just analyze based on a policy. The policy should come after you understand the reality, which is the geopolitics. So if you ask me why Lee Kuan Yew appears so sharp, it's because he's been always been briefed, because he's a compliance officer. He's always been briefed of the geopolitics, the reality of what's happening out there. And that is very important for the MFA, because the MFA can come up with policies in compliance with the geopolitics that's happening. So if today Lee Kuan Yew is alive and he is a prime minister, he will assess the whole situation and look at it very differently again. He will come up with new policies and he will change many things. Okay, um, and I'm sure Lee Hsien Loong is changing, but I think when it comes to exercising leadership, they are two different people. Okay, so Lee Hsien Loong wants to stay consistent in embracing globalization. Okay, so my question to you now, since I talked for about 25 minutes like that, okay, do you see interdependence coming back soon at a global scale? I'll type it out. I'll let you think for a minute. It's very important for you. I'll explain to you what. Okay, let the rest think about it. Not so soon, but eventually. Uh, but my question is soon. Interdependence probably be back as regionalization in the near future. So you see more regionalization rather than interdependence at a global scale. Yeah. So I think the more appropriate way is to look at how regionalization would be um, filling up the vacuum for the time being. Okay. So in your lifetime, I say ASEAN is going to be very important. Okay. ASEAN is also coming together. So when we look at ASEAN, we have to take a bit more attention to it. Okay, so what do you see at the present moment about ASEAN? Take note of it. That is, you see unity among the members there. Okay, you will see that they kicked out Myanmar military government out of the dialogue and asked someone bipartisan, to represent us, Myanmar, in the dialogue. Would it be fair to say that developing countries will feel the need for interdependence sooner than hegemonies? Not always true. Africa may not want that kind of interdependence. They might want regionalization. because Africa, maybe like Latin America, they want to have that economic nationalism, like a dependency theory kind of thing. All right. So it is not definitely all developing countries would like that. But in Asia, the ASEAN, they would like that interdependence because ASEAN has been an investment playground for MNCs. And you just look at any ASEAN country, all they are concerned about is that the region must be stable to be conducive for foreign investment. Whether it's communist Vietnam, okay, democratic Philippines, okay, ultra liberal Singapore, and the Malay civilization and Indonesian civilization, they are so diverse, but they still have something in common. They want more investment coming into the region. So they fight for that stability, and peace for the purpose of people coming into the region to invest. Okay, but Africa might have a different view of how they want to be, and partly also in Africa, there are many tribes in every country. So if you study African studies, right, and then you understand. So when I was in undergrad, I studied about Zimbabwe. Well, the country is very complex. So many tribes. Okay, and when the British left, wow, there was like power struggle. There was a vacuum, and all the tribes were fighting. But in ASEAN, I don't see that as a major problem. Even in Myanmar, you see the Rohingya and the people fight, and then you have the military. Only three or four problems within Myanmar. Again, Vietnam, okay, is homogeneous. I would say Vietnam, to me, right, it's not so much of Southeast Asia. They're more like the Northeast Asian, like the Koreans and Japanese, homogeneous society. Okay, and Thailand also, in a way, quite homogeneous in that sense. Okay, and you will not see that kind of problems that Africa would face. Okay, and you see across Asia, right? Besides, I think even Myanmar is not that bad. They have no problem with land reforms there. Okay, Africa have major problem with land reforms, but now they have gotten their act together somewhat because of the infrastructure that has been developed. So the land reforms have somewhat been having been spearheaded by infrastructure development there. Okay, so interdependence will be at the regional level, I would say. Okay, so regionalization is a very important topic. Not many people has actually been entertaining regionalization. Okay, and when we look at it, I hope you pay more attention to it. Okay, the unipolar world, that political experiment of Americanization, financialization, I think has already um, been quite clear to all of us that it is a failed experiment. Okay, so you see America as a declining hegemon, but still very legitimate because of its productive power. All right. So when we look at all these tenets, uh, Smith, which is absolute advantage, Ricardo, which is comparative advantage, these are all theories here. Okay, so Smith was saying at that point in time, Scotland would have absolute advantage with machines and the export to Asia, and Africa will have absolute advantage in raw materials, human resources. Okay, Asia also have human resources, and then they will be labor intensive in that sense. Okay, the movement of people you can see in United Kingdom, you have people from Pakistan and Bangladesh working in the factory there. This outsourcing thing wasn't that fashionable then. So they brought in those laborers from what was known as Hindustan then, and brought them then to the United Kingdom and worked as laborers there. Even Africans there, they are still there. They get very disgruntled. Oh, they were colonized, blah blah blah. So, but Ricardo had a different view that sometimes some countries have absolute advantage in everything, so they don't need to trade. Then he said, nah, doesn't make sense. Sometimes we need reciprocity. So to have reciprocity, we should calculate the opportunity cost. Okay, so there's a mathematics to it. But in your IPE class, you don't need to look at it. The opportunity cost should be lower. So if I'm labor intensive, I should specialize in labor intensive goods. Okay, But if a big country like America is good at cotton, but the opportunity cost of having cotton industry is very high, right, as compared to technology. So America should just totally focus on technology, okay, which is software and all these, and give up on cotton. So they should specialize in technology, all right? But that's the theory. But in reality, no, the state can intervene. So in America, they have a part of the constitution that they protect the cotton industry, okay? And the other thing, Europe should not have any comparative advantage in agriculture, right? Theoretically, because Asia will have more land and better and have all the soil and cheap land, cheap workers. They should specialize in all these fruits. But in Europe, they protect their agriculture industry. So why is that so? Uh, because of the political purpose of food security. You cannot be reliant on other countries for your food security. And the pandemic has proven very clearly that this comparative advantage is bullshit, which is what Singapore did. You know, basically they collectivize all the agriculture, and then they just pocket them at some corners there. Okay, with very little agriculture in Singapore, and import all the food. Okay, so now we're going to face food a problem with global supply chain. Okay, and even coal or electricity, energy. You cannot be dependent on everyone. Okay? So you are supposed to be good at it. Doesn't mean you should forego the other industries. Okay, so but theoretically, Ricardo said that you should do that. Okay, but politically, you shouldn't do that. So Europe has its own food security. Even with energy that they have their own, there's still a crisis because they still depend on the Russian gas. So what is it that they must quickly transform for Europe? Anyone has any idea? With the crisis in Europe, the energy crisis in Europe, what do you think they will be pushing very hard? Any idea? This is gonna catch up very fast. This trend. So perhaps this is a new sector that you might want to consider. Nuclear energy, maybe. Okay, one of them. What's the other one? Solar, green energy. So you can see that everyone is using the excuse that there is a climate crisis. The climate has always been a crisis for a long time. Just that now, it becomes, energy becomes like it's always been a political tool used by certain countries, and to, not disrupt your electricity and your energy resources, right? You want to have your own self-sufficiency in terms of renewable energy, wind farm, solar panels, nuclear energy, blah blah blah. All these are to mitigate any moral hazard. That means disruption in your economy. So by that, in the same vein, right, Ricardo's argument of specialization will have its limitation. Okay, I repeat myself. Ricardo's argument of specialization will have its limitation because it does not look at the political consideration of specialization. There are consequences that will emerge from specialization. Okay, Singapore is a clear example. Okay, of specialization. We gave up agriculture altogether, and the focus was just on trading, okay, and banking. And when the crisis hit, wow, we really, hung high and low for food, and they they are still, in a process. So this at this present moment, when the global supply chain is going through a disruption, you're going to see high inflation. So I'm telling you also that at the same time, inflation is going to be very high. And what did the government do to try to address inflation in Singapore? Anyone has any idea? This is going to help you also. What did the government do just recently? 1 minute. Yeah. So just show you this. Singapore surprises with monetary tightening. So as their third quarter GDP growth is 6.5%, we are still in the midst of a pandemic. Singapore doesn't use interest rate as a way to tighten up the monetary policy. They use their exchange rate. Okay, and this is when the Sing dollar becomes stronger or revalue the Sing dollar, the imports become cheaper. So if you go deeper and look at it, it is also clear that when the imports are becoming more expensive, you have to raise your currency, the value of your currency, so that to a level off, okay, and accommodate the higher prices that are going to be um, forecasted there. So this is very obvious that we are not having the kind of resources locally. Okay, so Singapore says that it is a trading hub. So once the disruption in the global supply chain, okay, happens, which never happened for so many years, suddenly it hits us. Okay, now we really have to rethink how to develop our country. So they cannot say, "Oh, Singapore is a small economy. We cannot close up. We cannot have agriculture, not enough land." They really have to reconsider this again carefully. Okay, so Ricardo's explanation, I repeat myself, of what um, this comparative advantage, that you should specialize, is good only as an economic theory. Okay, it helps a lot if you are a developing country with a lot of land, agriculture, but then you have no industries. Okay, so you want to industrialize, push up. But then this is a lesson you should learn. Even China has this problem here, and China also have food shortages. Yeah, they industrialize until they forgot about agriculture. Okay, so you can see Xi Jinping is gonna. I'm not too sure. I think the person that's gonna replace Li Keqiang is gonna be a person from the agriculture ministry. Okay, they're gonna bring back the development of agriculture. Okay, the development of agriculture, the Western media will take advantage of that by saying that, these Chinese are going back to the cultural revolution of Mao Zedong. I'm very sure they're going to say that. You see, they're going back to the cultural revolution. They're not willing to open up. So you can be sure that when that happens, the Western media is going to do that. But you look at it from the Chinese perspective, is that if we do not have food security and people cut away our food supplies, then we will have famine again. Okay, we will have poverty again. When there's an inflation in that, in higher prices of food supplies, okay, then we will also have high inflation in China, and that will make it worse, the inequality in our country. So they have to prepare in advance for the higher prices of food supply, and even they are very prepared now to move back to coal, okay, and have all this pollution, just to prevent the economy from suffering shortages in energy, in gas, and all this. Okay, because they have a lot of coal, right? But they do not. They have to import a lot of oil and gas from around the world, and if the prices keep going up, okay, um, then it's going to be problematic for the industrialization of China. So you will see a slower growth in China, and the recent one was 4.9% growth in China. For China to break even, they must at least grow 6%. Okay, so it's moving, moving back to the middle of more agriculture. Okay, so you get ready for Western media, every day slamming China for moving towards the Mao era of cultural revolution, and they're scaling back on industries and all these things here. Okay, so another person take note in the liberal world is John Stuart Mill. Okay, John Stuart Mill, his contribution to economics and political economy was that he dissected consumer and producer. So when you study economics, that when I study you study at A levels or diploma, you see the circular flow, producer and household. Okay, so he went on to look at the internal economy. Okay, then you have governments involved in it, and then you have the leakage and injection. Okay, all these started coming in. That's when finally you have this person called Keynes come in, look at the theory of unemployment with the government intervention there. All right. So liberalism went all the way, and basically they talk about peace to trade, the doctrine here. Your exams, you might need to evaluate this peace through trade. And what is it that you really need to emphasize? What you really need to emphasize is actually the positive sum view. And there are a few things you need to look at. Okay, peace to trade. Besides the trading regime, you got to go inwards and look at the domestic economy. Okay, of what liberals believe. And through this doctrine, okay, via this doctrine of peace to trade, eventually the world will be a peaceful and stable place because of interdependence. Okay, and when you strengthen the interdependence, there will be less likely for war. That's what they say. But is that true? Is it true? I think they have some whatever, I don't know what inventing. Now basically rural reforms and also wanting to tie their currency to natural resources and encouraging the young to go back to the villages and also encouraging SMEs to build business. And yeah, they want to spread out their development. But I think, well, it's quite difficult to do that. Okay, so my question again, interdependence, the argument for by the liberals is that it will strengthen interdependence. Okay, that means commercial linkages around the world, more trade happening. There will be peace and stability. Is that true? I give you 2 minutes to analyze this. Is it true? High power. Is it true that when you strengthen interdependence, there will always be peace and stability? As long as their interests remain aligned and all parties involved are satisfied with their respective gains. Okay. But in reality, this is theoretically, it can be true, right? But in reality, let's talk about the reality. Always remember that you have to address the reality. So is there a gap between what you say, Yong Seng, and the reality? Coburn was wrong because trade benefits the rich more than the poorer nations, which leads to greater inequality and political instability. So, in reality, okay, if I put Yongxing and Jiang argument together, okay, Jiang is more of a realist in that sense. Okay, Yongxing is a liberal from his argument. I'm not saying that you are. Okay, Mm, then you say that okay, in reality there will be inequality, and history has shown it. Okay, and how this will be accentuated because everyone will have the self-interest without really telling the other party. Okay, so when we see all these, there will always be a point of dilemma from a game theoretical perspective. Okay, there was always a dilemma that they would like to cooperate, but because there's this element of interest, there's this element of opportunity of overtaking one another, this competition. So they will say, "Oh, we like to compete, but then must be fair." But there's this element, this thing about competition in the marketplace that eventually will lead to a dilemma. Okay, you must be very clear about that. Not really because states are ultimately suspicious of each other's action, correct? Yes, this is what I read too. It's mostly for social reasons to retain the family unit, not necessarily because of food security, but still an interesting angle to view it, I guess. Um, I think it's a dual use, not just family unit. It's also to have, you cannot be always dependent on the international economy. You have to have subsistence living as well, especially in a big country. So if you go Indonesia, right, in 1998, the farmers don't give a shit whether the rupiah collapse or not because they don't sell to the international market. A lot of farmers, what do? They 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 have their farm mainly for themselves, or if they sell within the country same price. So if people say, "Oh, I want to buy your things, but you must sell me cheaper because the international our currency has depreciated," the farmer say, you can piss off lah. I don't need to sell to you. I can sell to the people around the area the same price. You're not happy, you get out. Okay, but who are the ones that suffer in the Asian financial crisis? Were the traders here, not the farmers there. The farmers, their meals all taken care of, their children, they have many children, grandchildren to take care of the farm. So they're not worried. Okay, so China is looking at not having the whole economy plugged to the international system here. Because when you do that, right, you are subjected to the volatility in the markets, the international market. So you must remember that Xi Jinping steps into power and say he loves Marxism. So basically, he is trying to signal that he has studied capitalism, and the whole problem of capitalism is capital itself. So we need our economy, some parts of it, not to be subjected to the volatility of the international market. Okay, so when you do that, you are not allowing China to be undergoing cultural homogenization. Okay, instead, China will still be culturally intelligent. That means they know what's going on in the world, how different the people are from them, but at the same time retain their cultural identity. So that cultural identity is what what a lot of people say is that to um, still understand the family unit. The Chinese are very concerned about family unit, and then he also proposed that they have more children. Okay, so that's one. At the same time, subsistent living was agriculture was a Chinese way of life also. So they have their own Chinese way of life. Okay, the Indonesian also have the agriculture as an Indonesian way of life. Okay, so you can't say totally it's all for family unit. There's a dual use there. I think the social reasons are just a cover for the government trying to redivert jobs away from the cities as available openings decrease with MNCs being kicked out China. Okay. I think you're saying you shouldn't say kicked out, right? You should say remobilize your resources out of China. Okay. So this is a very interesting time where you see China is shifting its economy back um, to an agriculture economy. Okay, not so much all industrialization. They will still have all those solar panels and all these things that they really developed, but they will not be like chasing that dream like Japan. Wow, you know, try to sell cars in America. If you don't, then you have stagnation, and they're not going to do that. So is China going to stagnate? I doubt it. It's going to slow down their growth. They're very different altogether. I wouldn't say I understand China that well, but I do know that they have their strategy. That you look at how they address Western imperialism. And then you will know that, okay, wow, 2008 come. So now we must absorb our unemployment. We change to this first. So after the next step is that they will sure force us to open. I think now we move back to agriculture. After that, when we have agriculture, they can't touch us. Then they will go and try to press us on Hong Kong and Taiwan. Okay, and then in North Korea and all this. So they will have all these scenario plannings in China itself also. Okay, so that interdependence is basically a good framework to lure countries into the trading system. Okay, so this was underpinned by diplomacy that, you know what, when you open up your economy, we can get out of poverty, and we do not want you to be poor. We want you to join us to enjoy the wealth, and we can share equally. And from there, we have reciprocity. We can import from your country, and then you can export to us. Okay, and then you will have that growth, and you have that wealth accumulated, and of course do us a favor. Buy our treasury, support our economy, buy our goods, learn our language, we'll give you scholarship, so that reciprocity is all there. But at some point, the competition start to heat up. So when the competition heats up, right, you will see that, people look at things differently. Really. They say, "Oh, I only promise you to get out of poverty," which is what Donald Trump said. "But we didn't promise you to overtake us." Okay, so it doesn't make sense that we should let you overtake us. Then China say, "Okay, but we're not trying to overtake you." But the way then the Donald Trump and administration will say, "No, but then the way you are growing, definitely you're overtaking us." Then after that, China said, "No, but you are the ones that give us the scholarship. So we have all the manpower now." Okay, but now things have changed because you are stealing our intellectual property. No, that was a deal that we had before. Then America will say, "No, the deal is over because I think you're smart enough to take care of yourself. So, okay, we draw the line." So you draw the line, it becomes a Cold War. Okay, so the interdependence actually broke down the moment this human capital, the movement of people, okay, from China to America, I wouldn't say totally zero, but reduce by 95%. Okay, colleges in America will accept lesser Chinese students. At the same time, the universities are going through a crisis. Okay, the subjects that are taught at the universities are changing because of the new Green New Deal that is coming up here. Okay, the new world order, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, engineering, IT, all will change. Okay, because the old kind of subjects like banking and finance, right, may not be relevant anymore. But there will be banking, but banking and finance, that subject needs to be um, reevaluated, and new subjects needs to be incorporated into the specialization there. Okay, so payment system have changed, so they will not have the Chinese scholars in the American universities learning all these things there. Okay, even if they have very few, but not enough to implement in China. Okay, but what happened before that was during the interdependence was that a lot of scholars from China go to America, learn all the best practices, R&D, everything, IT, everything, bring it back. There's an Alibaba there. Okay, then you have Tencent, then you have Alipay, all kinds of things coming out in China. Okay, I wouldn't say everything is all American, but they got the idea of what a capitalistic system would be like. Okay, and there were many millionaires, and it enriched China. They got China out of poverty, and that's it. Okay, so China really, definitely, the Chinese understand very clearly that they have to do it themselves. But the problem is they do not have enough allies to expand their um, productive power. But America has the allies. Okay, so back to square one. So the containment, right, is going to worsen China's situation. So Chinese already preempt that by um, restarting or relooking or redeveloping the agriculture economy. So play safe, very pragmatic way is to secure food security first. Okay, so before they do anything, food security and energy must be taken care of. So I do not know what's going to happen next exactly, but I do see that the interdependence is totally over. Okay, so after that interdependence came the Second World War. So you have this Hayek and Keynes. Okay, this was the period of embedded liberalism. Hayek and Keynes had a debate. So if you are studying economics and politics, you should know this. You can read the book in the National Library. You have a Hayek versus Keynes, Keynes versus Hayek, and Keynes Hayek was an advocate for lesser government intervention. Keynes was an advocate for government intervention. Okay, so Hayek was against it. He said that the government intervene or the central bank intervene in the market with the interest rate, it will create distortion. But Keynes said if you don't have government intervention, then you will also have distortion. Okay, so Hayek was actually in Cambridge, and then he went on to LSE. Okay, so you must understand in the Western world, they have this thing called governance. You can disagree with people. You create another institution. Okay, but it's not happening in Singapore. Okay, you can disagree with PAP, create another institution. They call it fake news. They have POPMA, FICA, whatever, all kinds of things. Okay, you don't get that in the Western country. So it might sound a bit chaotic. People are not used to it, but um, it created a new school of thought. So if you do study economics, Keynes is macroeconomics. And Hayek, at the end of it, created the new study of microeconomics. Okay, so that's how people who study economics have to study micro and macroeconomics. Okay, so um, I just want to give you, just in case you forgot, that from liberalism all the way, the first part of liberalism was pre World War One, called liberalism. There was a period. And that's where you have the gold standard. Okay, then post World War II, so it's 1945 all the way to 1973. There was embedded liberalism. Okay, can you tell me what was the financial system that they used? That replaced gold standard? Anyone? And it collapsed by 1971, 72. Sorry. So when it created during the early years from 1860 onwards, right, all the way to 1914 was the gold standard, right? It was liberalism. We created interdependence. So the second attempt to create interdependence was World War II with the Bretton Woods Institution. Okay, so Keynesianism, which was embedded liberalism. Okay, what is it? What was the name of that um, financial system they had? Something to do with gold, but not really gold standard. Nope, not gold dollar convertibility. Gold dollar convertibility, but more precise. Something like Yong Seng, the gold dollar gold convertibility. You need to put this in perspective here. If I don't do it now, people should forget. So I need to update my slides here also. Gold exchange system. Thank you very much. So, wow, I never seen this person. Niha Datlani. Wow. Are you first time joining the class or what? Doesn't matter, just tell me yes or no. Okay, so the gold exchange system, it collapsed in 1972. Okay, so maybe Nihal can next time give us more answer, then I can see his presence. Okay, now I want to tell you something. When you ask me for letter of recommendation, if I never see your name before, very hard for me to write anything for you. And you never submit any assignment to me. I don't know how to write in your letter of recommendation. So I received an email from someone. I was your student last year.